Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the quantum signature readout, her coffee growing cold as the impossible data scrolled across her screen. The neuromapping lab at Berkeley was supposed to be quiet at 3 a.m., but here she was, chasing ghost signals that shouldn't exist. Moki's collar, the same smart collar she'd put on her rescue. Cat 6 months ago was pinging from somewhere approximately 47,000 kilometers above Earth's surface. The problem, Mochi had vanished 3 weeks ago. Elena rubbed her eyes, wondering if sleep deprivation was finally claiming her sanity. She'd adopted the scruffy tabby from the campus colony after he'd started following her to work, drawn perhaps by the quantum field generators in her lab. Cats, she'd learned, were surprisingly sensitive to electromagnetic fluctuations. What she hadn't expected was to find his biometric signature broadcasting from what appeared to be a cloaked orbital station. "Okay, universe," she muttered, pulling up the spectral analysis. "Let's see what kind of cosmic joke you're playing on me now." The data was elegant in its impossibility. Quantum entanglement patterns suggested not just one consciousness, but hundreds, all networked through a bioneural matrix that defied everything she knew about feline neurology. Cats weren't supposed to be capable of collective consciousness. Hell, they barely tolerated each other's existence on a good day. 47,000 kilometers away, researcher Keth was having what humans might generously call a bad day. The Kytherians' four-chambered brain processed frustration differently than most species. Less emotional volatility, more methodical irritation that built like pressure in a sealed container. Subject 4847 is exhibiting anomalous neural cascades again, his assistant reported, tentacles dancing over the bio. Keth's gill slits fluttered in what passed for a sigh among his people. The collection protocol had been his idea, simple survey of Earth's abandoned fauna to study consciousness development in isolation. Stray cats were perfect subjects, abundant, unwanted by their human co-inhabitants, and possessing rudimentary neural architecture that made for clean experimental data. What they'd discovered instead was profoundly unsettling. "Define communicating," Keth said, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Synchronized brainwave patterns across all specimens. The quantum resonance chambers are registering coherent thought structures that span the entire facility." The assistant's chromatophores shifted to worried blue-green. "Sir, I think they're planning something." In the specimen bay, 437 cats sat in perfect rows, their eyes reflecting the sterile laboratory lights, with an intelligence that made the Kytherian researchers profoundly uncomfortable. They didn't meow, they didn't fight, they simply watched, their neural patterns weaving together like threads in a vast, patient tapestry. Mocha, though he no longer thought of himself by that name, occupied the central position. His consciousness had become the nexus, the focal point through which hundreds of feline minds could coordinate their thoughts. The process had taken weeks to develop, built on quantum entanglement triggers. The aliens had unknowingly activated with their own scanning equipment. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Kytherians had sought to map consciousness by imprisoning it, never realizing they were creating exactly what they claimed to study. Through the collective, Mochi felt the presence of Duchess, a former show cat whose owner had abandoned her when she got too old to win ribbons. There was Scrapper, who'd survived 2 years on the streets before the abduction beam found him. Shadow, who'd lost an eye to a coyote, but never lost her hunting instincts. Each cat brought their memories, their pain, their fierce independence to the growing network. And now, finally, they were ready. Back on Earth, Elena had managed to hack into what appeared to be a surveillance feed. The image that materialized on her screen made her stomach drop. Rows upon rows of cats in stereo containment units, their heads connected to neural mapping devices that pulsed with sickly green light. Scientific equipment she didn't recognize surrounded them, and tall, cephalopod-like beings moved between the specimens with the casual efficiency of farmers tending livestock. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "They're experimenting on them." But as she watched, something strange began to happen. The cats started moving in perfect synchronization, turning their heads as one toward what appeared to be a central camera. 400 pairs of eyes fixed on the lens, with an intensity that made Elena's skin crawl. Then, impossibly, her computer began receiving data. Not random signals or noise, but structured information packets that her translation software somehow recognized as language. The message was simple: "Help us help ourselves." Elena's hands shook as she typed back. How? The response came immediately, flooding her screen with technical specifications, access codes, and what appeared to be a complete schematic of the alien station. The cats somehow, impossibly, had been learning, not just about their captors' technology, but about their weaknesses. Your species calls it hacking, the message continued. We prefer to think of it as aggressive networking. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Even as prisoners in an alien laboratory, cats were still cats, independent, resourceful, and absolutely convinced they were smarter than everyone else in the room. As it turned out, they might be right. The Kytherian research station Nexus 7 had been built to study consciousness, not to contain it. This oversight was about to become extremely relevant. Keth stood before the central monitoring array, watching readouts that defied explanation. The feline specimens had somehow synchronized their neural patterns into a single, massively distributed consciousness. More troubling, they'd begun interfacing directly with the station's quantum computing core. "Sir," his assistant reported, "we're detecting unauthorized access to primary systems. Life support, artificial gravity, communications there are all showing signs of external manipulation." "That's impossible," Keth replied, though his conviction was wavering. "These are primitive mammalian brains. They lack the cognitive architecture for advanced technical interface." The assistant's chromatophores cycled through several colors that had no human equivalent, but roughly translated to, "You might want to sit down for this, sir. The unauthorized access is coming from Specimen Bay 7. In the Specimen Bay, Morchi felt the station's systems opening to him like flowers following sunlight. The Kytherians had made two critical errors. First, they'd assumed that intelligence had to look like their intelligence. Second, they'd connected every cat to their quantum resonance network to study consciousness formation. They'd succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. Through the collective, Mucci could feel Shadow's predatory instincts, analyzing security protocols. Duchess's pampered background providing insight into automated systems, and Scrapper's street-smart cunning identifying the station's pressure points. Hundreds of feline minds, each contributing their unique perspective to a unified goal. The goal was elegantly simple: turn the hunters into the hunt. Down on Earth, Elena watched her screen fill with real-time updates from the station. The cats had somehow accessed the facility's entire network, and they were sharing everything with her. Personnel files, research, data, technical specifications, all of it flowing through quantum encrypted channels that shouldn't have existed. More disturbing were the research logs she found buried in the data stream. The Kytherians hadn't just been studying consciousness, they'd been trying to create it. Their own species had reached the limits of individual intelligence, and they were desperately seeking ways to link minds into collective networks. The cats, apparently, had beaten them to it. Initiating Phase 2 appeared on her screen, followed by what looked like a station schematic with several sections marked in red. Elena typed quickly, "What's Phase 2? "Educational experience," came the reply. "Your species has a saying about curiosity in cats. Today, the Kytherians learn why."